First of all, it was by design. Your Constitution itself boxed black folk in. We've been boxed in by the United States Constitution because the original Constitution spelled out specifically how black folk would be treated in this country. You just mentioned something about we come here searching for life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That was not what it was talking about originally in the Constitution. Originally, when Jefferson and Madison wrote the U.S. Constitution, they were talking about life, liberty, and pursuit of property. Because in the Constitution, black folk were defined as property. 3/5 of a human being equal to a field animal, and you were treated as property. There's nothing in the Constitution that addressed the issues for black folk. We are locked and boxed into the Constitution. And until we go back and address that issue, black folk can never get out of it. And you can't get out of it secondarily, out of this box, because the United States Supreme Court put the lock on the box. The United States Supreme Court right now says, let's go back to the original intent of the Constitution, which says black folks should be 3/5 of a human being, property, and equal to a field animal. That's throughout the Constitution. It's never changed. And the United States Supreme Court then, in the Madison and Marlboro decision of 1803, says that we're going to make sure that we abide by that. And then later on in 1857, in the Dred Scott decision, says black folk have no rights that white folks are bound to respect. The Constitution have you locked and boxed, and the United States Supreme Court can make sure you never get out of that box. That is the most racist organization in America. 57 of the first people appointed to the United States Supreme Court were slave owners, and subsequently most of them have been racist. So you're not going to get out of the box unless you go back and address these issues structurally on behalf of black folk.
B1 family, welcome to Blacklogic. Today we'll be covering a lot of things in the Powernomics books by Dr. Claude Anderson, one of the master teachers for Black empowerment and Black economics. And through this, we're going to be playing some video clips for you guys to understand the approach in which we take in order to not be the bottom feeders, in order to us not to continue to get the crumbs from the master's table, but to empower ourselves and understanding how we go about empowering ourselves. And this is one of the most powerful books that I've ever read in my life. It states that Powernomics, the national plan to empower Black America. Now, I'm gonna leave a link to where you can purchase the book in the description of this video for you guys can get educated and understand some of the master teachings of Dr. Claude Anderson and a lot of the plans and actions in which we should take to not only empower ourselves, but to move forward as a collective group, just as other groups do, such as the Jews, such as the Asians, as well as the Hispanics, so on and so forth. So with that being said, I'm reading out of page 26, and bear with me, categories of inappropriate behavior. It states collusion with competition. This type of behavior is visible in coalition building. It is without a doubt the most troubling for the race because it is a strategy used by so many members of Black Americans' leadership class. Although coalition building is a popular concept, coalitions almost always operate at the expense of Black Americans. Even though those Black themselves are not organized and do not have stated group goals, coalition building encourages them to coalesce with other groups that do have articulated goals rather than to organize their own group. Black participation gives credibility and strength to ethnic, class, gender, disabled, and Spanish-speaking groups, some of whom compete openly with Blacks for wealth and power and openly oppose Black gains. When Blacks participate in coalitions, they allow the unique status, history, and debt owed to Blacks to spread to all of the subgroups. Race is made synonymous with minority, and racism synonymous with any form of discrimination. These are gigantic distortion of reality and give fictionals common ground for building coalition between Blacks in any group that perceives itself as aggrieved. Blacks should not be against any group, but with political or economic benefits, they do derive from coalitions with Asians, American Indians, Hispanics, women, or gays that take Black problems, convert them into minority problems, then propose non-specific universal solutions. Political coalitions created under the broad, ambiguous concept of minorities, cultural diversity, and multiculturalism do not benefit Blacks as a group. In collusion with the competition, coalitions give Black Americans a trickle-down political experience. They get what is left after gender, ethnic, religious, disabled, and Spanish language groups in the coalition receive what they want and need. Black Americans lose by default due to the inappropriate behavior of black leaders who choose cross-group alliances, white approval, and corporate dollars at the expense of their own people.
The golden goose, you know, the pot of gold. And then they look for symbolically, then they look for another symbol, which would be have a black man in the White House or a black man in the Supreme Court. But all these individuals have been unable to be able to address significantly the issues of black folk. What I told you is the maldistribution of wealth and resources and controls of things in the country. Black folk are non-competitive. They can't compete. Right here, you're in Washington, D.C., in Chocolate City. All these cities are going to be gentrified. All these major urbans that I'm telling you about, these big cities, they're going to be gentrified. And they're going to be, here's a scene that they're going to use 6 schemes to wipe black folk out. One's going to be called gentrification, which means come in there and dilute black folk down. When I came here to Washington, black folk were about 78% of the population. You're down to about 40% now. The second thing is privatization. You're going to take all the public resources and put them in the hands of the white dominant society. They're going to buy, they got the wealth, the money. They can buy as much as they want. That's why when in 1996, when Clinton lifted the Tail Cap Act in communication, saying that anybody can own as many radio stations and television stations that they want based on their money. If you know that whites own and control 99.5% of all the wealth, why would you say that, knowing that black folk can't outcompete them in buying up the media in this country? So out of 12,000 radio stations, and blacks used to have about 100 something, down to about 70, 80 now. And out of 12,000 in cable systems, 5,000, blacks don't own any. In daily newspapers, blacks don't own any. In television, blacks might have 1 out of 5,000. You don't have the wealth to be a competitive people because nobody wants to address your issue and get back and figure out how do we go back and redevelop this country so that black folk can have decent communities, and in those communities they can have an economic base, they can have a tax base, they can produce jobs for their own people. So rather than having our schools training black folk to go look for jobs, they should be training black folk how to create jobs for their own people in their own communities and have it through functional schools. That says this is an open country for freedom and opportunities for everybody. At the same time, we're talking about enslaving people and using them. And they say, here's what we do. When we write this Constitution, we use very broad, ambiguous language. One for language for whites and one for black folk. Now, when they talk to use these very broad, ambiguous terms, that was for whites. When blacks, they use words that blacks couldn't figure out. 3/5 of a human being, equal to a field animals, those who are indebted, those who are obligated in the labor class. See, all that was talking about black folk. The Dred Scott decision says that no black man has any rights that a white man is bound to respect. And what he was talking about was that you're not even citizens. And all the resources we got in this country, you're not entitled to it. Because now we're going to set up a social construct called the Constitution. And in that Constitution, it's going to decide between two group of people. Those who will be aligned with us and be a part of us, and those who will be in opposition to us. And so the next year, in 1790, 1 year later, Congress approved what they call the first nationalization and immigration law, which says this is a white nation. And anybody coming to this country must be white, period, or can pass by whites and be viewed as whites. And that way they'd be acceptable into the society.
Like, what do you think is the best possible way for us to start to get to that point of generating black wealth?
Fine, what's first we have to do is learn how to practice group economics and group politics. They say, and one of the 2 things that hurt us most during the slavery, and it had not been focused on. One was that our wealth was stolen from us. Black folk weren't poor people when they were slaves. They weren't holding their assets, but they had one thing was the most powerful, strongest, wealthy, valuable thing on earth. You know what that was?
No, sir.
Their labor. And see, and it's black labor. Nobody teaches black folks that. Your labor. That black labor was the most invaluable thing they could have. Because you see, when they set up this Constitution, they said all of the wealth of this nation is going to be embedded in what we're going to set up right now. And the first thing is land. We said, so the whole purpose of slavery should have been an issue for Martin Luther King and all of our leadership for the last 200 or 300 years. And the purpose of slavery was to what? Was to transfer, to maldistribute 100% of all this country's land, resources, business, gold, silver, chrome, magnesium, timber, and rights, privileges, and ownership and control of everything, and put it in the hands of the dominant white society. That was the purpose of slavery.
With it being such disparagement between black wealth and white capitalism and the way things are set up, there have been a lot of black people who have been successful. There are some black billionaires, and there are a lot of people who have, thrived in the system that has been set up that wasn't set up for us, rather. So why do you think we as black people are suspicious of those people?
Well, because of slavery itself. But during slavery, you have to remember this. We had, at the end of slavery, we had over 5 million blacks still enslaved in this country. And out of that 5 million blacks, we had at least about 6,000 blacks who had done very well under slavery. You know why? Because I told you what capitalism was. Get some land, get to control the tools, the land, the resources, and use other people's labor. And so one of the first people in this country that started using black people's labor, you know who it was?
No, sir.
It was a black man from England.
Dirty, didn't he?
That's right. He came in and he's the first one that started this thing about being a slave for the rest of your life. It was started
Chattel
by
slavery.
Yeah,
By a black man.
a black man from England.
This ain't
He started that. And
Really?
Yeah, and so consequently, blacks started getting into getting a few land lots here and there, and they wanted to use black slaves too.
Wow.
And so consequently, out of about 6,200 some blacks who got wealth during slavery, they did extremely well. They would have been millionaires in today's terms. But
Really?
so we always had some blacks that would sell you out, and also some who would just simply say, I'm gonna play this system to make ends meet. You got blacks right now in entertainment and also in sports. They're totally indifferent to the race matters. They don't care about the race matters. They said, I'm gonna milk the system. I'm gonna buy me a lot of land. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna buy me a hotel. I'm gonna buy me a bar, or restaurant, and I'm not gonna deal in racism. Period. I'm not gonna get involved even in a discussion of racism. I'm just gonna operate a business and take as much money as I can and help my family and my own people, my own family. Period. So we always got blacks who have such a limited amount of self-interest as a group. They'll take their own people to the cleaners.
Social etiquette. Behavior patterns in the category appear to stem directly from the old social or Southern racial etiquette. Though one of the major accomplishments of Black civil rights movement of the 1960s was to modify some of the social etiquette that traditionally existed between blacks and whites. Many blacks across America, especially in the South and Midwest, continue to honor old social customs. They avoid situations that make them appear free, independent, and active in shaping their own lives. They are perfectly happy to go to work or go to church, look at the television, and then go to bed. They still know their place and know how to play get low. To them, what happens to black people locally or anywhere else is of little concern. They want to appear as good Negroes, content, happy, compromising, and non-competitive. A good Negro or safe black person seeks approval of whites. These blacks would neither speak up nor speak out on black issues, nor would they defend against black injustice. Avoiding blackness. Blacks who exhibit the behavior avoid association with any form of blackness. They want to be the first or only black person in integrated company, school, neighborhood, organization, or political party. Like whites, many blacks gauge the amount of black presence in anything that is not integrated or is. All black is too black and politically incorrect. This phenomenon is peculiar to blacks. There is no similar expression that someone or something is too Jewish, too Indian, too white, or too Asian. Avoiding blackness allows many to live in a state of the now until the reality roosters come home, meaning they had their Negro wake-up call. A true story illustrates how blacks try to avoid blackness. A woman who had grown up in a conservative Midwestern town was proud of the respect and status whites accorded her family. She was proud that she and her family was economically better off than most blacks in town, and her husband was well known in white political circles. However, her world came tumbling down one day when she was in a grocery store with her young daughter. When leaving the store, they came face to face with a white mother and daughter. The young white child put on her mother's dress and said, "Look, mommy, there are some niggers." The white mother pulled the little girl close and whispered, "Hush, honey, those are Wilson niggers." The friend who related the story was a young black daughter. She said that for the first time in her life, She knew that regardless of her family's economic status or prominence, she was not allowed to escape her skin color. While blacks do not mind being identified with a particular sports team or political party, many reject being identified with the skin color team that God has assigned them. Avoiding blackness is counter to the way outgroups respond. They exhibit an increased sense of group consciousness and close their ranks. They create associations, organizations, and businesses dedicated to whatever characteristics others dislike. For instance, if Jews are persecuted because of their religion, they protect and strengthen themselves by building Jewish businesses, organizations, and tight-knit communities. They build Jewish synagogues. They teach Jewish culture, history, and religion. They help build and support the Jewish state of Israel. Women who feel marginalized by the system because of their gender respond by building women's organizations and businesses to promote women's issues. The gay community builds gay organizations, businesses, and tight-knit communities. Agents respond to this type of adversity by building businesses, organizations, and tight-knit communities around their Asian culture. When whites say they despise black people, blacks adopt the same attitude. They imitate whites and run from blackness, which serves as a rallying point around which to build defenses. When blacks run away from themselves and avoid their own skin color, heritage, history, and other members of their race, they become vulnerable and defenseless. They cannot protect themselves.
An alternative economic structure in the simplest form would be a Japantown, a little Korea, a little Italy, a little Havana, which means where black folk would do exactly the same thing everyone else is doing. The reason we never had an economic structure in the country for black folk is for three reasons. One, we never had a national plan and a commitment to do it. Two, is that whites are boycotting black communities, and three, blacks are boycotting their own communities. And that's why you'll never see a white person get in his car, go down to a black neighborhood on a Saturday morning, get out and go into a black store and buy anything made by a black person. But neither will you see any Asians coming out of Chinatown, going into a black community buying anything. Everybody supports their own structure except black folk. That's why out of 36 million black folk, after 400 years in this country, you do not have one single solitary black business district in the entire United States. That is naivete, it is insultive, and it's grossly offensive to black folk because you're creating problems for yourselves by not belling up to the bar and accepting responsibility of amassing wealth and capital, creating economic basis, creating an entrepreneurial class, creating businesses, creating jobs that will hire your own people, creating money to take care of your own public services, your lights, your gas, your streets.
How do black people start doing all those things if 98% of the wealth is in the hands of the white power elite?
We started working that very simple. We start where we are. We are right now amassing for disposable purposes something like about $380 billion annually. We're about the 9th richest nation on earth. But unfortunately, that money is dissipated through our fingers.
If part of the problem is blacks not being able to have political power and certainly not being able to have economic power, then a part of that equation has something to do with what's happening to us educationally in this country. Where are we missing it, and where do blacks have to go to get it?
We're missing it educationally because we've never sat down and discussed the historical relationship between us and the educational system in this country. Remember, the educational system was designed on a public policy that's gone in a complete circle, 360 degrees. First of all, we were denied education. Then we moved from a denied educational basis to desegregated education prior to the Civil War. Then we moved after the Civil War into segregated education. Then by the 1950s, we went back to desegregated education, and now we're back into a state of denial of education. Then I'm going to talk about dismantling the school system, going to voucher systems, or going to some kind of private school system. What that means, Daryl, is that black folk fail to understand that schools are not change agents. They're only doing what the environment wants it to do. Schools in this country, starting in the 1860s, were designed to create a manual labor force for whites society, period. Black folk became obsolete in the mid-1960s. They no longer need us as a labor class. So therefore, the schools are dysfunctional because they no longer need black folk. If we really want to make our schools functional, we have to come up with a national public policy about what we want our schools to do for black folk.
Isn't that a slap in the face to all the black educators and administrators in big cities across this country who are in charge of school systems?
No, it's not, because because nobody's ever sat down with them and say where it is that black folk want to go. Suppose right now we want to, let's say if we had a national public policy on black folk, just as whites have always had a national public policy on us. They've had a policy on us, but we never had one for ourselves. About what it is that we want to do as black folk. Supposing right now we want to go to the moon. Then once we decide where we want to go in a public policy, then it becomes incumbent upon all those educators and all those school systems to say, now what must our school systems do in terms of instilling in our kids the attitudes, the skills, the competencies to be able to get us to the moon.
Okay, Dr. Claude, my next question to you then is there such thing as black capitalism?
Yes, there is.
And
how's that
defined?
operated?
Yes, sir.
What we have to do is go back and remember what I told you earlier, that the whole point of slavery was the maldistribution of all resources, period, into the hands of one group.
Yes, sir.
What you have to do is create a situation where you can call some of that money back, or you can start creating your own wealth, or you can start getting it through reparations, or you can get it through inheritance.
Okay, well, why do you think black people struggle in the system that's set up for us now? Why do you think that happens?
Because you don't own and control the land, the tools, the resources, and everything else. When land was given out in America during the slavery period, that immigration was an open policy for everybody around the world to come to this country and get resources except black folk. And during that period, first thing that George Washington said is that the wealth of this nation would be in the land. He said, I want 100,000 acres of free land. And Thomas Jefferson said, I want 100,000 acres of free land. And then after he heard that, Patrick Henry that says, give me life or give me death, he then said, then I want 65,000 acres of free land. And then so consequently, during the period of slavery, during from point 1 up to 1862, that this country gave away 2 billion, B-I-L-L-I-O-N, okay, acres of free land, but it all went to whites, not to blacks. And see, and guess what? And all the land, and then the wealth of the nation was in that land, in gas, in oil, in timber, and iron, and coal, and minerals, and all that kind of stuff. Black folk couldn't get any land because the Dred Scott decision of 1857 says you have no rights to get any land.
B1.